On today's Locked On Giants podcast, Coach Gene Clemons of Giants Country joins us to talk about the latest draft strategies and more for the New York Giants. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina P. Train, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the Fan Nation Network, part of SI.com. And a special welcome on in to my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, click that little notification bell so that you never miss an update whenever I post a new video or short. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, pleased to welcome in again Coach Gene Clemons from Giants Country, as well as he contributes to the football game plan draft book that the Emory Hound was on last week. He talked about. And if you haven't seen that book, by the way, do yourself a favor. Make the investment in it. It is quite the draft guide. So, Coach Gene, glad to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well. Fantastic that the new 2024 football game plan draft guide is here. Make sure you go check that out, footballgameplan.com/2024 draft guide. But really just I'm ready to be through all of the suspicion and the angst and the guessing and really get down to who's going to be new members of the New York Giants.
Yeah, I think we all are at this point. I know it seems like every day a new rumor pops up, a new smokescreen pops up, and trying to separate fact from fiction when it comes to this draft has been quite challenging. But you know what? There are certain things that we can certainly look at. We can look at potential fits, how skill sets match up, what makes the most sense for the Giants. Should they trade up? Should they trade back? And Gene, let's start off with that question, because you look at the work that they have done in free agency. Have they done enough in free agency to where they can afford to give up some of their draft capital this year and possibly next year, should they want to trade up for a quarterback?
I don't think so. I don't think they added anyone that was dynamic in this in this free agency period outside of Burns, right? If you're talking about someone that's a dynamic, that's a splash player, that's change the dynamic of a game player outside of Burns, they didn't add anyone. And I could argue that the additions that they made, while reasonable and sensible, they all still have question marks, right? And so we won't know what they look like, how they look, what's the plan for them in the offense and or defense until we see them get out there, because this is going to be a new defense that we're looking at. And the offense that we've seen over the course of last season is not the offense that was envisioned in the preseason, indicated by the way in which people were used. I talked about that with Darren Waller when I spoke to him. And you should have seen his face when I mentioned the fact that the way he was being used in training camp versus the way that they used him in the regular season. His face lit up when I talked about how they were using him in the training camp. And that was a really good indicator to me that we didn't see the full scope and spectrum of what this offense should be. And so until we see that, we won't know how these positions are going to fit.
But that being said, Gene, there's a belief that if you want a quarterback, if there's a specific guy you've fallen in love with, you move heaven and earth to get that guy. Does it make sense to do that if you're the Giants?
I would say there's a thought process out there that you do that. Rarely have we ever seen it pay off. Like name the other time outside of the one season that they caught lightning in the bottle with the Rams, where they moved heaven and earth for the quarterback and it worked out. Like
you can argue Eli Manning, but that wasn't really that was a trade, really.
If you want to say Eli Manning, okay, cool. You can say that they moved heaven and earth to get Eli Manning and it worked out. But there was more bad years than there were good years with Eli Manning. So like catching the lightning in the bottle and getting those 2 championships. By the way, 2 championships they won where they were coming off of seasons where they weren't actually like murdering it or killing it. I think that's, yeah, okay, cool. If you want to give that one, if you want to say Stafford, but where else? If you think about the Tom Brady situation in Tampa, they didn't have to move heaven and earth to get Tom Brady. Tom Brady chose them and was able to walk there without giving up any type of draft capital or any players in order to get it done. Rarely do we see it work when you have to give up so much to get a guy, because now you don't have anything to put around that guy to help him be successful.
So in your opinion, it would not be in the Giants' best interest to trade up to get a Jaden Daniels or a Drake May, or even if they have them that high, a Penix or a McCarthy?
I don't think that trading up is the way. I actually have a piece coming probably later on in this week that speaks to one of the things that I think would be a disaster or in the worst interest of the team to do. And it might have something to do with that. So,
and that, of course, will be on Giants country for those of you wondering. All right, Gene, what about the opposite here? So if it's not a good idea for the Giants to trade up, they can sit tight, grab one of those stud receivers who should be there, I would think. But what about trading down? Does that make more sense for them, given, again, the needs that they, that they have, what they were able to do in free agency, and just where they're at this point in their rebuild?
I've written about this. I've talked about it. I've tweeted about it. If we are to actually take the Giants front office at their word, the coaching staff at their word, that they are dedicated to Daniel Jones being their starting quarterback, at least for the 2024 season, then there is absolutely no reason to pick at number 6, right? Because you can say, oh, well, we're going to give him an elite level receiver. Who's to say that guy is going to end up being an elite level receiver? We see top 10, top 15 wide receiver bust all the time. We see third rounders turn into Justin Jefferson, right? So what they should be looking for is, if they're dedicated to Jones, trying to put as much talent around him as possible. And if he's not the guy, now you have structured the team as so all you need is a quarterback. That's when you move heaven and earth to get the quarterback. When everything else is in place, like it was in LA, and we're a quarterback away, as they believe, we're a quarterback away from making this thing happen. So you put as much talent around Daniel Jones as possible. You give him the best opportunity to be successful with the most talent, the best offensive line you can get, the best weapons you can get in multitudes, not just if one person gets hurt, oh my gosh, we're in trouble, right? But multitude of weapons to where he can really show what he can do. And if he can't do it, then guess what? There's no more excuses. You're 7 years in. You've had every weapon you can possibly have. We've done everything we can. It's time to move on. So if you drop back in the draft, if you trade down, if you can find a trade partner, if you can trade down at a 6 with the type of people that are on the board, I believe it would garner another first-round pick somewhere, whether that's a 2025 first-round pick, or maybe it's somebody who might have 2 first-round picks to give up this year. But I think that sets them up to go and then put a package together in 2025 to move up to go get a quarterback whom I think is the most pro-ready guy to come out in the last 10 years. and that's Shedeur Sanders.
Assuming that, of course, Dion doesn't pull as he said, an Eli.
Big market. It won't be an Eli for the Giants. Remember, Eli went to the Giants. Eli didn't turn the Giants down. I think the New York market, if he was trying to set his son up in a place that would make sense, the New York market for everything that they want to do with the entire branding of who Shedeur Sanders is, the New York market would be great.
All right. Coming up, Gene, I want to talk to you about if the Giants do trade down, their strategy. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back and we'll talk about that. Hey, Giant fans, if you're having trouble finding those last-minute tickets to your favorite concerts, shows, and sporting events, Game Time has you covered. They offer a wide selection of seats complete with seat views to help you decide where you're going to sit, and they're constantly offering last-minute tickets through flash deals. There are no hidden fees. You'll know exactly what your deal is before you check out. And Game Time even has tickets available as late as an hour after an event starts, making it truly the best place to find last-minute deals at amazing prices. Want more reasons to trust Game Time? They offer event cancellation protection, and if you find your tickets in the same section and row for less elsewhere, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You got me, Patricia Traina, with special guest Gene Clemons, Coach Gene Clemons, over on Giants Country. He's been posting some stuff over there. Make sure you check out his work. And of course, he's part of the team that put together the football game plan draft guide, the only draft guide, by the way, that I am looking at as officially. So I've got that. And of course, we've got the draft prospects and stuff that we're doing over on Giant Country. So do check that stuff out if you want to get some insight into how we feel about the various prospects. And Coach Sheen, let's talk about, we were mentioning about the Giants potentially trading down. How far down would you go if you were them?
Well, I think it all depends on if they have a thought process on where they want to go with the first round talent. If the idea is that they want to go receiver in the first round talent, I would probably move down middle to upper back third of the first round. If their thought process is, hey, we're really targeting best player available, I'd probably move down to like say 11, 12, something in that nature. And I would probably think that they would be thinking a guy like Brock Bowers at that point, if he's still available.
And of course, that is definitely a need. It's a sneaky need. I don't know if it's a priority, but if he were still available, I'm sure.
Weapons for Daniel Jones, right?
Yeah, that's what it's all about. But it's interesting, Gene. You talk about weapons for Daniel Jones, but what about the defense? The defense isn't by far, it's not complete yet. And I know, we don't really know what Shane Bowen's going to do exactly. We can just kind of take guesses at this point. But what about that side of the ball? Do you maybe take your first round pick if you trade down and throw that over to the defensive side? And if so, where do you go in that case?
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea to always bolster your defense. But in this defense, where is the legit need? And do we want to run back a first round pick on a defensive area that we've already invested a lot in? So are they going to take another first round cornerback? Right? They've invested a first round, a second, a third, they've been putting draft picks into cornerbacks for the past 4 drafts. And so you would think that at this point they have a stockpile of young defensive backs that they can let loose and hopefully thrive. Do you put a first round pick into a safety? Probably not. If you're not willing to pay Xavier McKinney, why would you then use a premium pick to pay a first round safety that type of money. I think that sneaky, the place where you would possibly spend that first round pick defensively is on the interior linebacker and or interior defensive line. The D line is something, and by the way, Giants country fans, you should definitely stay tuned, because I've got a piece coming on one of the sneakiest places, and I'm gonna tell you, it is across that line in the front, where we talk a lot about the edges, and we just I guess assume that Dexter Lawrence can play every position by himself. So I think right up the middle is where I could see them using that first round talent at. It's not going to be on the edge, even though I wouldn't be mad if they just took the best edge available and tried to stockpile edge talent. And it's probably not going to be in the secondary. So right up the middle, defensive tackle, interior linebacker.
Gina, I know, GMs and coaches, they go best available, which is kind of a myth in a way, because they do try to marry up need. If you're prioritizing the needs for this Giants team in the draft, like let's say just the first 2 days, so 3 rounds, what are the positions and rank them in order for me? Tell me why that they absolutely positively have got to come out with if the value is there in the first 3 rounds.
Wow. So if the value is there and the people are there, right? I think that they need to come out in the first 3 rounds with a wide receiver that is an actual legitimate outside receiver. Not another Darius Slayton type, a guy who kind of can be everywhere. Someone who could legitimately play on the outside and be a threat and a weapon on the outside. They need to come away with a quarterback, right? Not necessarily because he has to start right now, but because you want to continue to bring in talent to push the guy in front, to let him know, hey, your job's not safe, and we need to be ready for if he goes down, so we don't have to put a Tommy DeVito out there. No offense, Tommy Cutlets. And in third, I think they need to come away with a linebacker. I don't like the depth of the linebacking core. I think that they have a guy in Okereke, and then I think they have a bunch of dudes that are just whomever's in there is in there. And in this scheme where we think they're going to possibly be more like legitimate 4-man front with a nose in the 3 technique. Yeah, you can hide a linebacker a little bit more, but he still has to be able to make tackles when he gets there. And way too many missed tackles out of anybody not named Bobby Okereke last season.
So the re-signing of Isaiah Simmons, that didn't satisfy that need for you?
What does he play? I still don't know, right? I still don't know what he plays, and he still misses tackles. He's an athletic guy. If they're going to legitimately put him in there as the guy, but if he couldn't beat out the guy, if he couldn't beat out McFadden in front of him last year, halfway through the season, or once he was, comfortable and in the system, if he couldn't beat him out then, what makes me think he's going to beat him out? Right? So to me, he still is operating as a gadget type of player. I still believe that the best position for him is to just make him an edge rusher and let him go. Like, bring him in on situational pass rushing situations and let him go. Take the thinking out of it. Take the guesswork out of it. Stop making him do 4 and 5 and 6 different things, and just let him focus in on doing one thing and one thing that takes advantage of his athleticism. But that's not a middle linebacker. And so if you need a middle linebacker, somebody that understands how to read and react, who knows how to run fit, and then who makes tackles while he's there, there's going to be an abundance of them in rounds 2 and 3 that you can grab at that point in time that could make this defense better instantaneously.
Gina, I want to go back to your list for a minute, because you mentioned wide receiver for the first round. If the Giants trade down, they probably will not have a crack at Harrison or Adunze or Neighbors. So let's say they trade down, I don't know, to 11 or somewhere in the teens. What group of receivers would you say have good value in that range that maybe could be an X for the Giants and might be a fit for what they do?
So I have been, and I'm sorry because I'm trying to bring up a list because I knew this would be a topic, and I wanted to make sure that I had the name of the guys that I was really like looking for. But to me, the only guy in that top. Well, first off, let me rewind. If quarterbacks are going to go the way that people believe they're going to go in the first round, they might be sitting there with their pick of wide receivers at 6, right? So if you're sitting there and every wide receiver is still on the board because they went quarterback, offensive tackle, right? Now what do? Do you stay at 6 and just pick whoever your best on wide receiver is? Or do you say, well, there's 3 of them on the board. We know that these next people need blah, 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 blah. We're going to drop down 3, 4, 5 spots and pick a receiver at that point. Now, if the receivers all run at that point, at least you picked up some compensation for giving up on one of them. But I believe that a guy like Xavier Leggett from South Carolina is a perfect type of wide receiver for this offense. They already have the guys. They already have the switchblade guys. They already have the unmitigated speed. Like people keep acting like Darius Slayton doesn't consistently run by entire defenses and catch long touchdown passes every single year. He's been operating, as much as Giants fans don't ever want to give him credit, he's been operating as a wide receiver 1 in an offense where the quarterback has been shaky, right? So now if you get a guy who can operate as that heavy target guy, who's big, who's strong, Leggett is big like a lot of the big athletic X's that you see in the league today. Does he run the best route tree? No. But on the outside, guess what you don't have to do? You don't have to run the best route tree. Mike Evans might be one of the worst route runners in all of the NFL, and yet he has put together a Hall of Fame career. When he's done, his statistics are going to be better than a lot of the guys who have gold jackets. And so, like, for me, that's one of those guys that I look at and say he is a perfect fit for what they're doing in New York. And again, the list is long. The guy from LSU, who doesn't get a lot of love because he's right next to neighbors. The guy in Washington doesn't get a lot of love because he's right next to Dunze, right? Like there's receivers all over the place in this draft. It might be the deepest receiver draft that we've seen in quite some time. So I don't really understand why it's such a need to grab one of these top guys. If we remember, the draft that Justin Jefferson didn't go until late, that was a draft that was heavy with wide receiver talent, and they had guys in the front of that draft who were all supposed to be can't miss, and all we're talking about now is Justin Jefferson, right? So I think that if you're smart, there's not even a necessity to take wide receiver in the first round if you don't feel that the value is there, or if you think that you can get a reasonable facsimile in round number 2. But if you want to, there are going to be guys that are there that people will reach for to help them, make up for the fact that they didn't get one of those big 3 wide receivers that people believe are going to go in the top of the draft.
All right, coming up, Gene, I want to ask you about some of the latest revelations, if you will, that have come out about certain guys. I want to kind of separate fact from fiction, get your take on it. Folks, we'll be right back after this. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can do more of it. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you find your assigned therapist isn't a match, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm Patricia Traina with Coach Gene Clemons, and we're talking draft because, hey, it's the most wonderful time of the year, and we are in the thick of it. And in a couple of weeks, we will have answers as to what Joe Shane, Brian Dable are thinking, and the rest of the NFL are thinking. But, Gene, it's interesting. I follow these reports that come out daily. It seems like, the NFL community thinks this versus what the draft analysts think. And I want to start with one in particular that came out recently, and that is that the NFL community has a little bit higher opinion of Michael Penix Jr. of Washington than maybe some of the draft analysts who have him pegged for like a day 2 pick. What's your take on Penix?
Okay, so I think that the reason that the NFL community may have Penix higher than a lot of the draft nicks is that the draft nicks are out here trying to act like GMs, but without any of the information that the GMs have, right? And so they don't know the medicals. And so all you ever hear about Penix is concerns about injury. Meanwhile, the last 2 years, the man has played and has not been injured, has not been an issue. He still has the level of explosiveness that he didn't even show during his time at Washington because I believe he was sandbagging. I believe he said, I'm not going to be out here trying to run and do all of these things so I can get labeled a certain way or so that I might put myself into any more harm while I'm trying to make an NFL career out of this thing. I believe that NFL teams have seen the medicals. They feel comfortable with what the medicals are. They're saying, hey, listen, a quarterback in the NFL tears his knee up twice. He comes back. Nobody thinks anything less of it. He goes on to play a million years in the NFL. So if he's already shown that he doesn't need that athleticism in order to manipulate the pocket and stand in the pocket and deliver the football. So if that's the case, then why should we be worried about it? So I think it's just that the NFL insiders have a better understanding of the medicals than the people on the outside do. But there's a small community of people who will tell you that he's been high on the list for the longest time. Like for me, he's nowhere near where people have him. I'm hoping as a GM that the insiders feel the way the outsiders feel, because then I can get him in the second round, or I can try to sneak back into the first round in the back end and get him at the back end if I want to control him for 5 years. But that's not even really a thing anymore. Like trying to control a quarterback for 5 years isn't a thing, because after 3 years, if he's good, you're extending him anyway, right? So I just think that it's one of those things where the outsiders don't have the knowledge that the insiders have.
All right, here's another one. And I know I asked Emery about this when he was on the show last week. I'm going to ask you about it as well. Marvin Harrison Jr. is not the clear-cut number one receiver. At least that is what some people are saying now. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree. But I've always been on the side of he wasn't the clear-cut number one, because when I look at him play football, you never see separation receiving. Like he's never running away from defensive backs. He's either wide open because of something schematically, or he's catching contested balls. It doesn't mean that he's not good. It just means that I'm going, well, why are people so sticky when it comes to him, right? Why is that such a thing? He looks fantastic. He looks all of the part. But why are these other wide receivers running away from defensive backs and he not quite running away from defensive backs the same way? And so for me, he was never a clear-cut number one. and probably why I have Malik Neighbors ahead of him in my rankings, and why he's, not the clear cut number one in the football game plan 2024 draft guy.
What is he, number 2, or is he behind Odunze?
Well, I think the way it's broken down in the draft guide, he's behind Odunze. In the draft guide, I think for me, he's probably number 2. Just in the way I would rank him and what I'm looking for. I actually give, if we're talking about the Giants and what the Giants' needs are, I would say that he and Odunze, he and Malik Neighbors give you the best fit because they can operate as clear-cut outside receivers. Odunze can operate as an outside receiver, but he's had most of his success in the slot. He just happens to be big, right? And so I think if we're talking about guys that would fit better for the Giants, I would probably lean Neighbors and then Marvin Harrison Jr.
All right. Speaking of Neighbors, I think it was Tony Pauline came out with an assessment in which there was some question about whether Neighbors would be able to handle the big market like a New York.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a concern, or is that just, maybe smoke being raised because somebody wants to get him?
Fiction. It's fiction because there is no more aggressive atmosphere in football than Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Baton Rouge, Louisiana is a pressure cooker for wide receivers. It either busts pipes or it produces diamonds. Malik Neighbors is what everybody thought Kayshon Boutte would be. And Kayshon Boutte couldn't handle the pressure in LSU, and that's why he didn't have as much success. That's why he eventually fell out of favor. That's why he left school early. Malik Neighbors did everything that people thought Kayshon Boutte was supposed to do and never actually did. So I think and by the way, this is why LSU receivers have so much success in the league, because they are used to pressure. They're used to that expectation of greatness in that small area that's packed with football fans, rabid football fans. That's all they do. That's all they live for. It's so popular in Louisiana that half of the teams half of the high school teams, their color schemes are purple, gold, and white, and most of them are the Tigers.
Okay, one other one that kind of pops up on occasion. Drake May is not a top 4 quarterback. He's a guy who could potentially slide down the board to 10, 11, the early teens. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that Drake May and McCarty are products of hype. I don't think either one of them deserve to be in the same thought process as Caleb Williams, as Jaden Daniels, and even as Michael Penix. I don't think they have the same qualities that make them, the level of talents as those other three. I think Drake May has been getting by on hope for 2 years. He's never come up big in a big game. And then I think that McCarthy is just a nice quarterback. He's just a good quarterback, right? He's a good quarterback on a team that was stacked full of really, really good old football players. Like, that matters in college now, right? And so the fact that he's done what he's done and he is who he is great. But both of those guys, especially May, though, I think have been hyped to a level that makes you believe that they are on par with Caleb Williams and on par with a Jaden Daniels. But I don't see that at all.
Do you see? I know some people have said that Drake May is Daniel Jones 2.0. Do you see that?
Yeah. Looks the part. Looks fantastic in the pass. Has athleticism that you would want. Has good arm strength. Does some really fantastic things on film. But there's always a if with Drake May. Well, if he had more receivers, or if he had a better offensive line, if he did this, if he did this, if he did this. It's the same thing that we've been saying about Daniel Jones for the better part of his career. If. There's always an if that came with Daniel Jones, and there's always been an if that's come with Drake May. So when people say that, he's a Daniel Jones 2.0, I think that they're just looking at the fact that when has he ever done it? And like, when have you ever said, hey, yo, he elevated that team to that level that they have not been? And we can say that about some of these other quarterbacks. We can't say that about him.
And probably the same thing about J.J. McCarthy, you think?
Well, you got to give McCarthy credit for steering the ship that won the championship, right? So if nothing else, that he's able to play quarterback at a championship level, right? We can't even say that about Drake May. And I don't want to hear what he was playing for North Carolina. He did this, he did that. What makes Drake May any different than Mitchell Trubisky? Both of them similar builds, athletic, ability to run, really good arms, but just doesn't quite get it done when you need them to get it done at that level. I just don't think you reach for a guy like that. And it's a disservice to Drake May because it's not Drake May's fault that he's being put into a top 5 category, but that's the reality of what we have. So if he doesn't work out, it's not his fault. The same way it's not Daniel Jones' fault. The reality is if Daniel Jones was a second-round pick and he had a couple years to sit and mentor, if we didn't try to push him to just be Eli right now, you might be looking at a different quarterback right now. But we'll never know that because that wasn't his lot in life. And I think that if the Giants had a chance to draft May or draft McCarty at 6 and they take that chance, then you're reaching for a guy that you can't possibly tell me is number 1 on your board. And when you come out and you say that he's number 1 on your board, I will be on the Locked On Giants podcast calling them liars right here and telling them to show me the board. Show me the board where they had him ahead of Caleb Williams, had him ahead of Daniel of Jaden Daniels, and then I want somebody to prove it to me because I watch film on par with any coaches ever coached in the NFL. We watch hours on hours on hours on hours, and there is not a lick of that tells me that he is better than Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels. So if that happens, just know you're going to start seeing a whole bunch of tweets from me banging the table trying to figure out what's going on around here.
I think I would pay to see that because I know how passionate you could be about that. Gene, a lot of people say that, for Brian Daboll to make this offense work, he's got to get a Josh Allen type quarterback. Do you agree with that? And if so, which of these quarterbacks fits that mold? Or do you think that, maybe they can go outside of that Josh Allen type because there is only one Josh Allen, if you think about it?
Well, I mean, if we want to be honest about it, if you want to go and get a Josh Allen type, you just wait. I actually just finished a piece talking about how low the Giants should go to take a quarterback, and I really looked at it differently because I said, okay, it just all depends on what they're trying to do. And so I talked about somewhere around day 2, the back end of day 2, looking at a Joe Milton, because if you're looking for a Josh Allen type, a big, supremely athletic with a bazooka for an arm, Bazooka Joe is who you go get, right? Nobody will ever convince me that somebody watched a Josh Allen film and said, oh, well, he's just some coaching away, right? Because he was awful in college. There's no other way around it. Like, he was playing at Wyoming and he couldn't beat out guys who couldn't make it, like Canadian League teams as quarterbacks, right? Playing with the same talent that he was playing with at Wyoming. He couldn't beat them dudes out for like awards because he just wasn't that good. He wasn't that great. And so they took him on measurables. They took him on the perceived like upside. Nobody in this draft has a higher upside than Joe Milton does, because Joe Milton possesses all of the things that Josh Allen has, including, by the way, possibly an even stronger arm, if that's even possible. Like, he has that big of an arm. So if you wanted to take somebody and go and do the Josh Allen project with them. None of these other guys are Josh Allen types. The only Josh Allen type in the draft is Joe Milton. And you can get him for cheap.
And he's a guy that you think, 1 year development, and if they move off of Daniel Jones after this year, you think he would be ready to rock and roll?
If he's that guy, right? Like if he is him, if he is that dude, obviously you're rolling the dice. But if he's not that dude, then guess what? Go get another quarterback. That's the beauty of this thing. Like when you don't take a quarterback in the first round, you are free to take a quarterback every single year. I don't know why more teams don't do it. Like it's the most important position in football. Let everybody else tell it. Yet people are afraid to continue to taking swings at it. I'm swinging every single year. Every single year, I'm trying to get one of those guys to try to develop. And if I don't see the develop coming the way I wanted development to come, the same way I would cut a running back or cut a tackle, or I'd get them up out of here too.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense to me. I mean, why not? You see teams hang on to quarterbacks for way too long. And then, all of a sudden it's like, oh gosh, we better get a quarterback now because this guy isn't it. So Gene, final question. Since we were talking about, fact and fiction, what's another, misconception that is out there, you think, about this draft class, whether it be the first round or another round or a player in particular that from your study is not true?
I would say that the biggest misconception about this draft class is that the quarterbacks in 2025 are much worse. I think that they are making people believe that if they don't get a quarterback this year, that next year there won't be a quarterback to get. And I'm here to tell you that is not the truth. There are a ton of talents that are going to pop up and be really, 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 really good NFL players if put into the right situation, the same way that all of these guys are going to be good if they're put into the proper situation. So I would say it's the over-exaggeration of how good the quarterbacks are this year and how bad the perception is of quarterbacks next year in the draft. That's the big one. I also think that it's not being talked about enough. People have said it a little bit. It's not being talked about enough. This is a heavy, heavy, heavy offensive line draft. There are guys that are going to get picked in the 6th and 7th round who are going to step onto a field and start day one. I guarantee it. Like there it is that deep at the offensive line position. The tackles, you probably can get 10 deep on first round talents at tackle, let alone guys who are going to develop into an NFL caliber player outside of that top 10. That's just in the tackles. And we all know that guards get devalued, so they drop in the draft. Centers definitely get devalued, so they drop in the draft. So you're going to have guys going out there grabbing these guards in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round. And those guards are going to come in and start, which is why I actually thought it was interesting that the Giants decided that they were going to add all of this veteran talent instead of at least leaving an area that they could go and say, hey, we want to pluck a premium offensive line draft pick and bring him in, maybe a 2nd rounder or a 3rd rounder on the offensive line. But the way that they've done it in free agency, I don't see them using a draft pick on an offensive lineman. I would be surprised if they do, especially because they don't have that many picks.
Well, I would think maybe tackle would be where they would, if anything, tackle.
If anything, right? You would think.
But they, these guys that they brought in, don't forget, they brought a lot of them in on 1-year deals, past, with the exception of Runyon and Illuminor. Mm-hmm. Most of those guys are on 1-year deals with the veteran minimum. So, and then they also got the 2 young kids that they're, still trying to figure out what they've gotten them. So
yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? They brought in Runyon and Illuminor for multi-year deals, right? But they still have all of this young talent, and I don't know if Illuminor is going to play tackle or if he's going to play guard because they've committed to Evan Neal being a right tackle. Well, that's where Illuminor plays. He's not playing on the left side. So if he's not playing right guard, then where is he playing? If Runyon's not playing left guard, then where is he playing? So like, and then if those guys are playing, then what are you saying about McKeithen and what are you saying about Ozudu, who I really think got screwed in the situation because you had him out there playing left tackle and he was never supposed to be a left tackle. He was supposed to be playing left guard, so he doesn't get a chance to play where he's supposed to play at. You got him playing left tackle out there for Andrew Thomas, and you're surprised when he struggles. When you had him playing guard, right? You had him playing guard, and then you just moved him to tackle instead of moving like somebody else out there and allowing him to continue as a young football player to continue to develop at the one position where he was supposed to be developing at. So we didn't even get a good look at what he could do before he got injured. It was just it's a shame down there with all of those linemen. That's for sure.
Yeah, Carmen Brasillo, the new offensive line coach, certainly has his work cut out for him and trying to sort all that stuff out. But
Absolutely.
six picks, a bunch of needs still. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do. I still say they're going to go wide receiver round 1, but I
wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised they just stay pat and take wide receiver at 1. But I think if there's the opportunity in there to move down and either recoup a premium pick this year or set themselves up for 2 first rounds in 2025, I just don't know how you give that up when you've publicly come out and said Evan Neal is our starting right tackle, and you've said Daniel Jones, when healthy, is our starting quarterback. Like, why would you then reach for anything at 6 that you don't really like? A rookie wide receiver is a rookie wide receiver. Some of them take time. They don't all just hit the ground running, right? So we'll see. It's really interesting. I'm going to love looking into the psyche of how they set up their draft when it's all said and done. And I think that the undrafted free agents will be really key in what they try to target, because it's going to be a lot of talent that does not get drafted. And what do they attack? What do they look to get in the undrafted free agent pool? Does that say something about how they want to build for this coming year or for the future?
Yeah, and I think they have room for a lot of undrafted free agents too, if I'm not mistaken. I think I want to say they were at 70 on their 90-man roster, so they're going to be able to add some talent. And Gene, it's going to be a busy night, and we're going to have a lot of analysis to do, so we'll have to have you come back if you're willing to talk about, what they do and how this unfolds. And we'll, of course, have some videos over on Giants Country as well as here on the Locked On Giants podcast. So, Gene, I want to thank you for coming on with me. As always, I'm telling you, our conversations just fly on by. They go so quickly, I think. So thank you for coming on. Giant fans, thank you for tuning in. As always, we have episodes all this week. Dane Brugler is going to be with us later in the week, so make sure you tune on in for that. I'm also working on another guest. I won't tell you who, because I'm waiting to find out when he's going to be available, but fingers crossed I'll have him midweek for you. For Gene Clemons, I'm Patricia Trainer. Thank you for tuning in to the Locked On Giants podcast. Giant fans, we will see you tomorrow.